If you've been drafting best ball teams this summer and listening to content, you've heard, but he's getting his ADP's going up, his ADP's going down. We need to draft this guy because he's 2 spots behind ADP. What is ADP? Does it matter in the context of these drafts? Myself, Erik Beimfohr, we're going to break down everything you need to know for ADP, our thoughts on it. Let's get into it.
1, liftoff.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tuesday night Spike Week show with myself and Erik Beimfohr. And this is a show that I have wanted to do for probably 2 months now because I listen to other content out there, and I'm not knocking other content, but I think
with all due respect, you should have said with all due respect. That's what you, before you say something disrespectful, you have to say with all due respect before you say it.
Well, I don't think they're they're not fundamentally wrong, but I just think the ADP thing has gotten out of control for a lot of these talks that we're having. Like, I remember talking to you last year and we talked about levers, right? Like, you're pulling levers as you go through, like, this is why I want to draft this guy. This is why I want to draft this guy. I think this ADP lever has gotten put on like a pedestal almost, that people have gone too far with it. And I think what I'd like, as we talk through this today, there's a bunch of different things for ADP, right? Like, obviously we're not saying go draft Davis Mills in the first round, even though that happened in a draft for me recently. Shout out to DK. But
God bless DraftKings.
But in the context of drafts, I think that the ADP just is getting, I won't name who it was because I honestly don't think I even remember, but I did hear a stream earlier this year where somebody said, this guy is 2 picks past ADP. We have to take him. And this was like 7th or 8th round. And I'm going to be honest, I think I texted you right away because I think my brain exploded. I'm like, what am I missing here? Why is this in this particular part of the draft? Why does this matter? And it does matter what part of the draft you were talking about, right? Because 2 picks past ADP in the first round is much different than 2 picks past ADP in the 7th round. So it's knowing, as we go through this and start talking about it, it's knowing when does that matter? When does it stop mattering too? Because I do think there's a point that ADP stops mattering. And should it be that number one lever that you're looking at all times? And I'm not convinced it is. Where are you on your overall general view of this?
No, I totally agree. I think ADP is maybe one of the most fascinating elements of all of best ball, because I think anyone, that has, really anyone with a brain, you don't even have to have done a bunch of drafts. If we explain what ADP is to you, you can probably understand why it's impactful and why it matters. But I think the reason, like, what happens in best ball a lot, or so far in best ball for the last couple of years, right? We're still like at the very infant stages of best ball. So this shit blew up quick, fast, and in a hurry, right? Like, just a couple of years ago, like, shout out Herzik. Like, it's awesome that he won. I mean, who doesn't want to win 200 grand? But fella, you won 200 grand, and now, like, they're handing out 200 grand in tournaments, that fill in 3 days in June or whatever. Like, this whole space is exploded just so fast. And I think every time that happened in DFS, right? Sports betting, poker, pick a competitive, peer-to-peer kind of speculation type game, whatever. You run to like, how do I like solve this thing? And we're going to go back and look at, like, okay, let's look at what happened. The difficult part with best ball is, in particular around NFL, we don't, like, we are never going to get enough like slates, if you will, best NFL full season regular, what I would call the main slate, right? Like a Sunday main slate on DraftKings is and sorry, I'm now checking my mic and realizing I'm on the wrong mic. Thank you for giving me a little nudge, like, hey, dumb shit, you're on your AirPods. But you get a ton of like main slates in the NFL for DFS, right? And you want to play poker, dude, like you can have an infinite sample size. Anybody could with the amount of hands, or tournaments, whatever that you play. In best ball, you get one per year, and it is entirely decided based on binary results. But our process of drafting cannot be we cannot say, I know this guy's going to smash and I know this guy's going to fail, because like we're always wrong about that. And so it comes like when I bring it back to ADP, you have to think about like what it really is. And we've run really fast to try to solve the game with this ADP concept in mind. And I think that we've lost a little bit of sight of the why behind it. Like the why is the most important part to all of the shit. Why do you draft multiple quarterbacks on a team, right? Well, it's because you would like to have multiple shots at that onesie position. There's a bye week. There's right. The why behind everything is the most important part. And the ADP stuff has become more of just like everybody just says, oh yeah, I got ADP value. That's a good thing, right? And it's like, it's all about the why. And sometimes you could take a player that I know that your example of like 2 picks of ADP is clearly probably something a little bit silly, and most people would understand that that's silly. But you could pick a player with far more picks than 2 of ADP value, right? I'm picking at 125. This guy has an ADP of 108, and he could be a bad pick for your team. But if you are just really honed in on that 80, if like you said, if you're putting that ADP lever on the pedestal and not some of the other levers that we need to pull when we're doing our drafts, you can really run into trouble. And that is not to say that in a vacuum, ADP value is bad. It's absolutely not. But it's all about why and what the goal we're trying to achieve with ADP value, right? It's like if we entered a draft, like I use DFS all the time. I apologize for people that don't like DFS or whatever, but that's where I come from. If all I cared about was price, right? So I log on to DraftKings every Sunday morning and I say, I'm just playing all the best point per dollar plays, every single one of them. And it's like, it's not only price of why I put this lineup together, right? I'm putting the lineup together for a purpose, tell this story, right? All the cheesy lines that we use. ADP is that same way. ADP is impactful because of the things that it helps me do during a draft, right? Get better projected players at a cheaper price. I get a better player at a cheaper price on a team where he fits that team. And I'm getting probably a combination of players that is not normal at those price because those, right, where they're normally drafted doesn't line up. If I'm getting those things with ADP, boom, awesome. Yes, do it. You right, take that ADP value. If it doesn't fit your structure and you're not really getting anything different than what anybody else is getting, right? The 2 picks thing is like the perfect example. Like it's literally called average draft position.
All right.
That means if you got him 2 picks after, a lot of other people got him 2 picks after, because it has to average out to that number. We have to display a binary number. And so I do just think, generally speaking, long-winded way of saying like we've gotten to the point where I just think it's very important, ADP is, but it's a little bit misunderstood because we've kind of, jumped the shark, if you will, on just saying ADP value. It's always about ADP value when it's about ADP value in concert with a lot of other things.
Yeah, and I think it just limits your exposure to different combinations of players. And the ADP is ever changing, right? As we go through the season, we see players move up, we see players move down, and we do see players that we think are priced inefficiently. So right now, it's been the talk of the week. So like we're not releasing any secrets here, but Breece Hall and J.K. Dobbins we think are inefficiently priced right now.
They were inefficiently priced before,
right?
and they're falling. It's crazy.
So we're making sure that, like, based on ADP, we're grabbing those guys. But in general, those are outliers to the hundreds and hundreds of players that are in this player pool, right? So yes, we are looking for ADP outliers to bolster our team. I'm going to be drafting a ton of Brees Hall because I think he's underpriced. I'm going to be drafting a ton, and I wasn't drafting him before. So now I am going to up my exposure to the field or above the field now. J.K. Dobbins, I was already drafting. I think he's getting, I think the Dobbins thing is the most nuts thing on the board.
It's worse than Brees. It's worse.
Yeah.
It's worse. Brees has real tangible risk. I know Dalvin left and didn't sign or whatever, but that's not like Dalvin's going to go make his rounds and he could get no one is like signing up to give him some money. And he could come back and say, maybe the Jets are my best chance to win a Super Bowl. And Brees did tear his ACL. Like, I'm not like ignoring all of that stuff. Dobbins is healthy. He's out there at practice. He's just like, doesn't want to practice. It's like, if you ever played football before, like during training camp and stuff, some of the good players do get favorable treatment and, get to sit out of certain things. That's kind of what's just happening with J.K. Dobbins. And yet he's going in like the 8th round on DraftKings in some of these drafts. It's ridiculous. He's like a 4th round pick.
Yeah. And if you look at some of the more high stakes stuff, because I was kind of looking at this for the Mastiff that I'm going to have to do 2 picks on relatively soon. He's still a 5-6 turn pick, J.K. Dobbins, like right in that vicinity. So people that are investing money are still investing money in J.K. Dobbins. But I bring up that point because I think it can also be the other way, and to show that these are just outliers on ADP. And I was trying to pull up as I was doing this. One of my favorite players in the NFL is Jalen Waddle. I love Jalen Waddle. I think he's a ton of fun to watch. Like, he is just like amazing, in my opinion, for fun. You know how many teams I have him on in Best Ball Mania? I have 112, 113 teams right now. I've drafted him.
I was going to, you take so much Mahomes that I'm going to say like 5 times.
I have him 4 times right now. But to your Mahomes point, there's no way I have a Mahomes Waddle team, right?
Right.
So by just sticking to ADP, we are limiting ourselves to combinations of players that we could, because at the end of the day, like, if I like Waddle as much as I think Garrett Wilson is obviously a better player. Amon-Ra is a better player, right? But look at that Mastiff draft. I grabbed Mahomes at the one.
I will say they're all pretty similar. It's just one has Tyreek Hill on his team. Honestly, right. If Jalen Waddle was in Detroit, we would be drafting Jalen Waddle where Amon-Ra goes, I think.
Right. So start thinking of those combinations of the back end of the first round. Like, if you're starting to put players in tiers like that, it's like, well, if Waddle's in the same tier for me as, or maybe
CD.
just once CD.
Right.
CD's the perfect example.
CD to Waddle. I think you could make a case Olave and Devonta Smith are in a little bit of a different tier. If you want to include them, whatever. But let's just say, for this argument's sake, CD to Waddle is a tier, right? That's a tier. That is the 11th pick to the 17th pick or whatever, give or take. Now, to your point, now think about how frequently those players that we're saying are in the same tier are drafted together, right? Think about that. Doesn't have they actually very infrequently are a lot of them drafted together, even though they're in the same tier.
And to your point, CD's at that, like, a little bit above. So I actually have 4 Mahomes CD teams. I have 0 Waddle Mahomes teams. Right. And I'm using Mahomes as the example because he's the guy that I'm drafting a ton in the second round.
Right.
You could do this with Chris Olave. Like, how many Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle teams do you have?
It's Garrett Wilson for me. I take Garrett Wilson.
Right.
He's my favorite. But like, how many Garrett Wilson Waddle teams do I have? I've actually done it. It's literally specifically like what you're saying. I've done it a couple times. Take Wilson 10th and then take Waddle in the second round, or take Wilson 11th, right? Or something like that, because of exactly what you said. There's no rhyme or reason to it, to your ADP point. If we're always sticking to ADP, now we got a long show ahead. It will get into all the nuances of this and how you implement it without screwing yourself up and ruining your portfolio or reaching for things that end up becoming common later, right? That's a thing that can happen as well. I think back to last year with remember Cooper Kupp, people would take Cooper Kupp and then they would take the Chargers wide receivers at the 2-3 turn. And that was not normal by ADP, but by the end of the summer, it was a thing that was done very frequently. And you were actually a total donkey if you did that. And so that is a huge element to all of this. But it's also a smidge of a free roll to do what you're talking about doing, where, okay, we know the common pairings right now because they're tied to ADP. So I draft an uncommon pairing right now and it eventually becomes common. What is the difference? I just drafted, right? I either draft the common pairing that I know is a common pairing, or I draft an uncommon pairing that maybe could become a common pairing. It's like, okay, the downside is they're equal, right? They're both common. The upside is this one is not common, especially at this point in the season. We're in August. BBM is more than half full, right? These tournaments are filling fast. Especially like we're going to get more puppies, right? On Underdog. They're going to fill fast. And you know what happens in the really fast filling tournaments? The combinations, ownership gets it's almost like single entry in DFS. It goes through the roof because it's only 3 days. Nobody's moving an ADP or whatever, puppy fills in 2 days. Guys don't move that much. So we'll get to a ton of these different elements, but it's like, it all goes back to that. Like, why is ADP important? It's because I'm getting a better player, right? A better projection. Like, no one is saying take Amon-Ra over Justin Jefferson. Right? Because Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra couldn't dream about being as good for fantasy as Justin Jefferson. You're giving up way too many points. It's silly. You can also maybe get combinations with Amon-Ra, right, at his normal ADP. No one is saying that. But when you get to certain pockets of that draft, it's like, understand why ADP is important. Like Jalen Waddle versus, and maybe if you disagree on Jalen Waddle versus Amon-Ra, you're like, nope, Amon-Ra is way better. That's also fine. But you have to make sure you know the answer to that. You're not just like saying, yeah, ADP says that guy's better. I actually think CD is, again, 2 years in a row, maybe 3 years in a row, one of the best examples of this. I love CD Lamb. He's really good at football. He's really fun to watch. I like to draft him. But for whatever reason, he goes at the front of this tier. I'm not sure he's different from Olave, actually. They're not that different. But yet, there's no you have Mahomes CD pairings, but you don't have Mahomes Waddle or Mahomes Devon. I don't want to talk about Devontae. Mahomes Garrett Wilson, whatever, because of the ADP thing. And that's even someone who acknowledges this and attacks the gaps in the ADP market. Think about the 600,000 teams in BBM where everybody's just sticking to ADP.
Well, I think that's actually like the main point for me to make here is this is something I think about all year as we're doing it. And to your point, snapshot drafts like puppies and stuff like that, so much easier to exploit this because you are only drafting over the course of 3 days. Everyone in those drafts right now, if you drop the puppy tonight, that back end of the draft, people are going to be grabbing CD Lamb, Amon-Ra pairings like it's going out of style. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be the ownership for that is going to be through
Wilson Chubb. Those are the two new sexy ones.
Yep. That's going to go through the roof. Like those, you're going to see those pairings a ton. So is it probably easier to attack that on the snapshots? Of course. But some of these guys settle into ADP. CD Lamb, perfect example. 2 years in a row. CD Lamb is not moving. The only way he moves is injury based, right? So CD Lamb is not going to drop down these draft boards. He's not going to move up over Diggs and AJ Brown. There's I would say a 0% chance of that happening, right? So CD Lamb is kind of stuck where he's stuck. And he's been stuck there for the entire year. And I would have told you that's where he was going to stick for the whole year. There was nothing that could happen barring injury. And we all know, like, we shouldn't even have to say that was going to move CD down in drafts or move him up. He is stuck there. We knew the guys that were going to move. We knew Tony Pollard and Chubb were going to move. They were in the 3rd round, right? So
Chubb was by far the easiest, also because people love, like, people will poke holes in Tony Pollard. People don't. The natural casual person is like, Nick Chubb, awesome. No Kareem Hunt, like, feed the beast. Like, yes, like, give me this dude. That was, like you said, you're not always going to be right about that either. Like
right,
you said,
you're not going to be 100%.
Injuries and things happen. Kadarius Toney gets hurt, which some would say I could have predicted that, and that's fine. But like CD, as you said, is like, we have data to, and we have even like history to tell us, like, yep, we dropped CD in here. He's just going to keep going 11th or 12th overall the whole summer, unless he gets hurt, or like you said, and there's no path to him going ahead of Diggs. Like, maybe you could convince me AJ Brown. I don't actually think so, but I would at least entertain the conversation. But like, he's just going to go 11th overall the whole summer. And all that does is restrict the combinations you get with CeeDee Lamb, but also the combinations you get with the other guys who are in the same tier as CeeDee Lamb, right? And like, that's it. That's the story.
Yeah, and basically what ADP has done, because it's become so efficient over the last 2 years, it is an efficient market. How do you exploit an efficient market? Where is your edges? And the other guy that I would say that I wasn't sure of in that range, just to like, not to make us look like psychics, I wasn't sure Garrett Wilson was going to stick at that end of first, second round. I thought there were cases where he could drop to mid-second round. I didn't think he was going to drop out of the second round, but I thought his ADP could fluctuate a little bit. It hasn't, but I wouldn't have been confident saying that he's going to stick where he's sticking. So there are guys that you can do this with. There are guys you can't. And I think specifically in the early rounds, and I think you can do this for the whole draft, I think what you need to do in order to exploit this is not just look at ADP, but start drafting based off of tiers. You need to set tiers of every single position and guys that you like and have cutoff points. It's like, I am not comfortable drafting Cooper, like fading Cooper Kupp to draft Garrett Wilson first at the 106, let's say. Like, say
you might be comfortable fading AJ Brown to draft Garrett Wilson. I'm not saying I am. I'm not saying our rankings don't show that or whatever. But right to your point, you have to create that line of delineation. Like, maybe it's not AJ Brown, maybe it's CeeDee Lamb. You're like, what's the difference between Garrett Wilson and CeeDee Lamb? That's my cut. And now you're tier. That is literally the definition of a tier.
Right. And now you're Garrett Wilson that you might not have Chris Olave with, right? Now that you've drafted him at the 108, we'll say the 108, you can get that pairing. And it's super easy to get that pairing now, right? Like, and it makes more sense. You feel a little more comfortable because you're getting Olave right around where he goes or whatever. You only moved up a couple spots on Garrett Wilson. And I think that is what I do. I'm not telling, do what you want to do at the end of the day. But I think that so many people are going to have some of these combinations at the end of the first round. Also, the Nick Chubb thing, I like Nick Chubb a lot. You're fighting if you're just now drafting, shocker alert, you're drafting against some teams that got Nick Chubb in the third round. It was what it was to begin with.
I was drafting Nick Chubb on every team to begin. I was a running back, bro. I was former me would have hated myself for what I was doing when late April, early May, because I was like, this doesn't make sense. I'm trying to pull up super quickly, like some of the early drafts. I think I was in not the very first BBM draft, but one of the very first BBM drafts. Yeah, Nick Chubb, 26th overall. So not like, that's still almost the middle of the third round. And I'm certain that I'm not the cheapest Nick Chubb that exists in BBM, right? There's late 20s, early 30s Nick Chubb out there. I'm sure of it. And so, of course, not that much to where, like, I don't think you should never draft him. But that's a good segue into one of my favorite ADP points ever. Tell me what ADP value is. Is it, I got this guy past where his ADP is right now in this draft that I'm in, right? Like, even Nick Chubb, who now goes like 13th overall or 12th overall or whatever, even if I get him at 18th overall, but he has been gone at a much cheaper price before. Is that an ADP value? Then what about if I got Kadarius Toney in my draft in May when he was going 70th overall, and I got him 77th or 80th or even 85th, right? You're like, holy shit, baby. Look at this. Kadarius Toney, 85th overall. And then August comes and he's going in the hundreds.
Yeah.
What is what is the most actionable thing? Because the only thing you can control is what happens in your draft, right? You can't necessarily control the future, especially in Tony's case where he gets hurt. And that's where these things get a little tough. Like when you try to do like analysis after the season, you're going to use like closing ADP, which I'm not saying that's wrong, but I am saying when I'm in the draft, I don't have closing ADP. I have ADP at that moment.
Mhm.
And so what does that mean exactly? Like with Nick Chubb, I still think you can draft him. We're not saying that, but did you get ADP value if you took him 15th? Because there's a bunch of teams with him in the 20s, it's just an interesting element to all this that it's important to consider all this nuance as it relates to ADP.
Quick brag, and I'm sure other people have it as well, but I have a Justin Jefferson, Nick Chubb, Tony Pollard team.
Oh, those are so good.
And you can't get that anymore.
You had to do that at the beginning in May because it was still available, and it's you cannot possibly get it now.
You would never get it now, but like that's the point. Is I felt Pollard, and he hasn't moved up a ton, but I felt Pollard and Chubb were going to move up as the draft season, and I think we talked about that too. I think there's a show somewhere where we're like, this value is not going to stay here. If you want Nick Chubb, you need to be drafting him now because this is the time to do it.
They projected as the RB2 and RB3 for me, like over Eckler, over Bijan, whatever. It was Chubb and Pollard. They project after CMC, and it was like, guys, they're going in the third. They're going in the third round, and they project closer to CMC than to Najee or whatever. So this is going to move up, but that's to the point. That's something that we use to our advantage, and why the ADP thing is important. Like when they're at this ADP that we believe is flawed, right? Like Brees, like Dobbins, take advantage of that. That's the time to take advantage of that. I actually think now is the time to take advantage of Tony, right? It's like Pat and I talked about this. We just released a new Legendary Sickos. It's on the channel and on the podcast feed if you want to go check it out. It's about as long as a Zack Snyder movie. So get your popcorn. On the director's cut of the Zack Snyder movies. But it was actually really good, and we talked about a lot of this exact stuff too. So anyway, carry on.
So I just want to go back to the tier-based drafting a little bit, because I think there's some examples I would like to make on this for myself. And again, like we said, everyone's tiers would be different, but I'm going to use the current ADP right now. Basically, might be off a little bit, but so T Higgins ends a tier for me, right? It's that, whatever you want to say about the Garrett Wilson, the T Higgins, and how you want to break that apart, there's at least one or two tiers in there for me. But after that tier, we're seeing Calvin Ridley move up to the second round. And I am a Calvin Ridley fan, but I've seen him start to go in the second. And I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, I don't know if I can do this. But from Calvin Ridley, it goes like DK Metcalf, Amari Cooper. I want to go all the way down to DJ Moore with that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 12 wide receivers over the course of about 2.5 to 3 rounds, roughly, depending on which site you're drafting on, right? Underdog, it's about a two round thing, 2.5 round thing. DK,
right. Early third to early fifth, right?
Right.
That's kind of what we're saying. Yeah.
Right. So you look at that tier and you start, if you put all of those guys in the same tier like I'm doing, and again, maybe you have Debo above everybody, which I would totally understand if you have him like in his own tier, him and let's say DK Metcalf. But I'm kind of cooled off on DK Metcalf a little bit, and he's kind of
I like him
dropping
fine. He is. I said this also. It's all the conversation with Pat is fresh on my mind, so that's why I'm referencing it. But he's like George Pickens to me. I don't really have a reason to hate him. I don't really have a reason to love him. Like the price seems whatever. I'm not gonna like I'm not going to pound the table and say, you can't take DK Metcalf at this price, whatever. I'm going to be like, whatever. Seems fine. I don't really have a take. I'm going to take him probably when he's the best available player. And that's it. Like, I'm not like, you don't have to have a really strong conviction about every player in the player pool. And that's kind of what DK Metcalf is for me. He's really good at football. Could he help me win a tournament? Sure. Do I think his price is like too cheap? No. So like, just take him when it makes sense.
Right. But for me, like, he's the beginning of that tier. And when you're looking at the beginning of that tier, if you grab DK Metcalf, it's super easy to pair him with Drake London, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Mike Williams. You can get all those.
They all line up, right? Yeah.
Right. But if that is the same tier for me, right? Like, that is a tier for whatever reason. At this point in time, like, Drake London, Terry McLaurin combos, how many do you have? They're right next to each other. Unless you're picking at the turn and they fall and they drop, kind of tough to get them, right? Or DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin. How about this? How about you so something I'm trying to do in a draft before it ends, I want McLaurin, London, and DJ Moore because they are kind of
right. Same team. I want them on the same team. I have combos. I've done what you're saying with 2 of the 3, but I have 0 of all 3 of those guys. And I really like them. I like all 3 of them.
And they're like big staples in my drafts. Like, if you look, I'm overweight on all 3 of these guys, but I do not have them all together. And in order to do it on Underdog, I might have to take one of these guys at the end of the second round in order to do it.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing that at the end of the second round, and Calvin Ridley is now a guy at the end of the second round who I like Calvin Ridley. His upside is amazing, but this is the same tier for me.
Right.
So if I decide that I want to grab Drake London over Calvin Ridley, is that a big deal? Like, do you see a massive difference for one team?
They project like the same.
Right. So if I decide I want to go Drake London, Terry McLaurin, and hope DJ Moore falls to me in that 5th round or whatever, and like, I bring this up all the time, but what really made me think about this, and I'm not perfect at doing this, by the way. I think just the human brain gets trapped in ADP because that's what we see and we get scared. But what really stood out to me, and I'll hammer this point until I stop doing content. It was 2 years ago when there was that range of 5th round wide receivers. It was Cooper Kupp. It was Robert Woods. It was both the Tampa guys. I think it was Jamar Chase towards the end.
Chase at the end. Yeah. Higgins got a little bit more, but the Bengals guys, God, what a world we were living in back then that all these motherfuckers were going in the 5th round.
But you weren't getting combos of them because you were sitting there. You were like, you know what? I kind of like Allen Robinson here in the second, or I think Terry McLaurin was going in the second round that year, and I like Terry McLaurin.
2-3 turn. Yeah, him and
right?
A-Rob both, yeah.
And if you had stepped back and just thought about it that year, because I like McLaurin and I love him this year. I love his price this year. I love getting Terry McLaurin. Why the hell did I like Terry McLaurin? And this isn't revisionist history. This is how I was thinking in the moment. I like these guys in the 5th round just as much as I liked a lot of the 2-3 turn guys. But because you're theoretically supposed to draft these guys here, I was getting stuck to the ADP of where they were. And now I'm having a lot of McLaurin and Cooper Kupp pairings, or hell, I'll be honest, I was drafting Allen Robinson that year. We all were for the most part. I'm not saying we were going.
Don't let me into you losers drafting that scrub at the 2-3 turn. Let me have one. I've drafted so many bad players, Rob. I've drafted so many guys who didn't even play a game for their team. Like Trey Lance he wasn't even I drafted Trey Lance in the 7th round of so many teams, and he was not even the starting quarterback on his own team. Darrington Evans became a fucking Twitch streamer instead of playing football after I drafted him. I've drafted so many players. I would like to take my W on being out on A-Rob for multiple years in a row while all these losers chase the A-Rob train.
Well, I'll give you that one then. But the point being is, and I did this way too late. I'm so upset with myself, like how late I decided this. Like this is when like this light bulb went over my head and just I had this epiphany. It was like, why the hell am I not drafting one of these guys in the 4th round and getting pairings of these guys? Why? I'm choosing between these 5 or 6 wide receivers in the 5th round every time. I'm not taking any of the running backs here. I didn't like any of the running backs in that spot. It was the 5th round in that year was always a wide receiver. Every single time.
Yeah, because there were 10 of them that were fucking amazing. Literally,
Right.
whether I know Robert Woods didn't turn out right, or what some guys didn't turn out, but they all looked awesome.
Right. And that's why I always throw his name in there, because at that point in time, he looked great. We thought he was
And if
going
you took Cup in the 4th and Chase in the 5th, you fucking you just absolutely crushed. But they both went at a very similar ADP, to your point.
Yeah, and you were going to get combos of these guys, and you got failing combos anyways. If you went Allen Robinson or whoever the hell else was going in the 4th round, the guys that crushed were in the 5th round that year, folks. It was Cooper Kupp, it was Jamar Chase. They crushed that year. They broke fantasy that year, right? Like, was Debo in the 5th that year? I can't remember.
Later, Debo was like,
Debo was later.
Like,
6th or 7th?
6th or 7th. I think he got up to the 6th, but mostly the 7th on. Again, DraftKings, always a little bit different or whatever. But I remember my very first BBM draft. It advanced that year. I really got the Matthew Stafford 80. You want to talk about closing line value? The Matthew Stafford closing line value was very bad, but that was the first year of Stafford with the Rams, right? And I got late 6th round Cooper Kupp. It was late 4th Chase, early 5th somebody else who rose, and late 6th Kupp. And it was like, honestly, like nothing else mattered. like you just advanced, you know what I mean? You just hit like a home run on a couple of different guys, and basically nothing else, absolutely nothing else mattered. And so again, clearly that is does ADP value matter? Fuck yeah. If you get the Cooper Kupp or Mark Andrews of that year, or Josh Jacobs of last year. But that also goes to the point of when Josh Jacobs was going in the early 4th and you got him in the late 4th, was that really powerful when he was going in the 8th, right? in late August or whatever? Right. It's just there's so much that goes into the whole concept of ADP, and obviously this is really ultimately kind of a combinatorial ownership and tier-based drafting show framed as an ADP show. But ADP is the thing that prohibits people from
the number one thing,
from being able to see the tier-based thing and being able to see the flaws in strictly drafting off of ADP, because ADP has to, again, you have to think, like, take a step back on like all this shit. Think about what ADP is. It has to, by definition, create a singular number for every single player. But what it really, if the sites would give us what we really want, it would show us a range that says, here's about where they're going. You could probably throw out the crazy reaches, the guys that take Isaiah Pacheco in the 2nd round, right? Throw that shit out and say, about what range is this guy going in to make up this ADP? That's what we care about, because that is what is saying the market's tier for this guy. Like, this guy fits in this tier. And that's what we're doing. We're defining tiers for these players and then saying, right, when I get to this year, the greatest, most fucking obvious tier of all time is late 3rd wide receiver. Like you mentioned with DK Metcalf, Ridley, or whatever. It's gotten a little pricier because all these running backs are not interested in playing football, so the wide receivers keep going up. But like McLaurin, London, DJ Moore, even like Brandon Ayuk, Keenan Allen, Jerry Jeudy, like, you tell me the difference, dude. Like, there is no difference. But in your app, when you go to log in and do your draft, it has to be in order. They have to show up in an order. They're not showing you a range. But really what you want to see is the range, and how often, if we think they're all the same, how often do these guys like go together? How often does Jerry Jeudy go 48th overall, even though his ADP is 38th overall? How often do people take Terry McLaurin and Drake London together? Like you said, how often do they do? I like particularly the Drake London, DJ Moore, obviously, for week 17 is very fun. How often does that stuff happen? Like, how often are people actually taking Justin Fields and DJ Moore right there at that turn, right? You know what I mean? Like, all this different stuff. That is the why of why ADP matters. But we get so stuck. Like, I do too, dude. It happens to me. I just took earlier today, I ended up with the team that I hated because it was like, I can't pass on this guy, like 12 picks past ADP or whatever. And it's like, actually, then I got to the end and I was like, I shouldn't have done, I should not have done that. It was like a psychological win, but not an actual win for that team. And that's what happens with ADP, because it has to be a binary number. And it's not real. The concept is not binary. And I think it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's just like it's the mental gymnastics you have to do in order to bypass players like that. It's tough. It's tough for anyone. I still can't do it every single time. I'm like, oh shit, he's usually a 6 rounder. I can get him in the 7th. And like to your point, if it doesn't make sense for my team, does it matter? Because he's probably projecting the same as these guys that are quote unquote a round below him or close enough to it that it's like micro. Now, if he falls 3 rounds or 2 rounds, like obviously different story, right? Because now you're talking, and we do see guys fall 2 rounds. Sometimes it's like, well, now I need to find a way to make this work because it's just the value is too good there, especially in those like
that's
probably 5th round on.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I just think the lever for this gets put up too high. I do want to hit this comment real quick. GA says, probably because you like those earlier picks that year than this year's rounds 3 to 5. That is not true. The reason this sticks in my head is because I remember not loving rounds 3 and 4 that year. Like they were just fine.
Well, Cup got there. That's some of these guys got there. Cup got to the late. It was Woods and Cup both moved up a bunch because, like you said, there was a bunch of guys going in that area where it was a bunch of dead zone-ish running backs, and like the quarterbacks didn't go that high back then, and like it was a different world, and it was Allen Robinson and and Keenan Allen and those kind of guys.
Yeah, just real quick too, the point that I forgot that I was going to make last night on the single quarterback, just because I remembered it later, was the single quarterback team that won last year drafted Hurts probably in the 5th or 6th round, and now you're talking about losing out on that value of a 2nd round pick that you were using in order to do it. So it really changes the landscape, but we don't have to get into that now. I just wanted to make sure I got that out there.
That's a Justin Fields comment is what that is. That's if you're going to do it with a Fields or Herbert or, maybe Lawrence or something like that, it is a, don't give up your 2nd round pick to do the single quarterback. Yeah, I agree.
Now, the other thing I want to hit on, because I think that the way to the rounds 1 through whatever you decide, the way to attack this strategy is by doing a tier base, like just sitting there, and you don't have to sit there and write it all out. You kind of can look at it and gauge like where your tiers are. If you want to write it out, that's also great. Whatever works for you, works for you. What the other thing I want to hit on, and then we can kind of just like open format it, is I do think ADP doesn't matter at a certain point in the draft. I just don't think it matters at all. And it might be round 15 or so for me where, and this is actually probably where ADP hurts me the most, is because if I want to get a guy that's in the 18th round or undrafted, if I want to get some of those pairings, like say I'm doing a 3 tight end build, right? And let's just throw out, let's say I wanted for my team, what made sense was Kate Otten, Jake Ferguson, and Hunter Henry when they were all going in the 18th round. And I'm doing a late tight end build. Right. But you know how hard it is to click that button on one of those guys in the 16th round in order to make that happen?
Or God forbid, you also need Mac Jones on that team. Right. Now you need your last 4 picks to all be 18th round to 18th round picks, but they're the best pick. They are the right picks. They're the best picks. So I always like to go back to it, and shout out to Corrine for bringing the auction dollar kind of analogy into it. Mm-hmm. Once you think about it from an auction dollar perspective and you ignore that stupid number that's in front of you when you're drafting that says ADP, and you say all these 18th round guys are $1 players, but the 14th round guys are $2 players. Right. Like you're like in an auction, would you spend $2 to get the guy who best fit this team and best fit this strategy that you are employing for this team? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We all do it in every auction draft we've ever. You also probably get to the end and you have a couple extra bucks and you're just like, yes, fucking Hunter Henry. I want him on this team. I don't care. Not to mention, even if you think that that's generally bad, you can also acknowledge the fact that it's like tangibly nothing. $1 more, right? Like if I go to the gas station and I pay $3 or $4 for my gas, like it fucking sucks that I paid the $4, but like it didn't change my life really. Like, you know what I mean? Like it didn't really, whatever. I didn't think twice about it. That's how it is with this. That has been more so even than where I think the lever of the tier-based drafting and making sure that I'm being really thoughtful about those tiers, like we've discussed so far, is really powerful. But the most freeing experience has been getting to 14, 15, 16, those rounds and just being like, I could not possibly care less about this ADP. I'm going to build the right. Does this team need Sam Howell and Mac Jones and Hunter Henry and whatever? Does it need all those guys on it? Well, you better start taking them, because like whether or not you took Hunter Henry versus Juwan Johnson has no bearing. Like that ADP value has no bearing on whether this team is successful. But the fact of whether you got Hunter Henry on this team as well as those other players is the reason this will be good or will not be good in terms of this team playing out over the course of the season. And it's like, it's hard. It's really hard because the ADP is slapping you in the face the whole time. And you're just like, I just took this dude that goes at 212 at 165 or whatever. And it's like, that feels brutal, but actually a lot of the times that is the right thing to do. Now, tons of drafts where that's not the right thing to do, right? You get, right. You also have other drafts where it doesn't go that way, but sometimes you do need it. I wrote about the triple option strategy, which is the perfect like application of what you're saying, where this whole strategy, you can go check it out on spikeweek.com. And I've done a video about it too. You smash running back and wide receiver through the first X amount of rounds. And then you draft late round quarterback and late round tight end, because we have a bunch of those guys that we like at both of those positions. But you also like correlate them. Right. So give me Mac Jones and Hunter Henry is like a crux of the triple option strategy. And in order to do this, you're actually probably taking like 5 or 6 guys that go at the end of drafts. Like you're going to have to reach on literally your last 3, 4, 5, 6 picks. And it's actually creating the best team for the structure that you've put together. But the ADP value, like if you post that to Twitter, let's just say don't post that to Twitter, because people are going to be like, you drafted 5 18th round picks on this team. Like, what are you doing? But it was actually still a good team that you built.
Right. And I think that the easiest examples to do that with are quarterbacks and tight ends. But I do think it fits with other positions too. Let's say that you were building that Daniel Jones team, right? You already have 6 wide receivers. You know you need one more wide receiver on this team. Back in the day, a week or 2 ago, when Jalen Hyatt was going in the 17th or 18th round, but you're in the 15th round, you're not in love with the running backs. You're taking 2 more that are just going to be like guys that you're taking shots on around that point. But you need to take that wide receiver for your Daniel Jones stack. It's like, but if I take him now, it's 2 rounds ahead of ADP. Well, who cares? Because it's the right pick for your team. You're still taking 2 shots on running backs at some point anyways. Now you might have a little bit different combination with those late round guys that other people don't have or something like that, right? So it allows you to be slightly unique and a part of the draft. And I love the auction analogy. I think it's actually something that someday maybe we sit down and we actually assign auction value to each round or each part of certain rounds.
Yeah.
Because it would be really interesting to see how you would break that down, right? What actually makes sense there. But yeah, I think that, and I'm going to keep reiterating this, we all have the problem that we look at ADP and it stresses us out, especially when you put a 30-second shot clock on there, right?
Yes.
Right. So you got to remember that that's the other mental gymnastic. You're like, you have 30 seconds to make this pick if you're not doing a slow draft. So 30 seconds to figure out what is the best pick. And yes, you can queue your players up and get them ready. And you can have these players queued up. But maybe you have that player queued up that's 2 rounds ahead of ADP. He's the only guy you got queued up. Hunter Henry's the only guy you have queued up right now. It's the 16th round, beginning of the 16th round. And you're like, shit, he's the only guy I have queued up. He's the guy that makes the most sense for my team. but mentally I can't do this. And I think that like that is the biggest hurdle to get over there. I want to hit on this comment from Kevin. He says, I think it's valuable to grab ADP value in the first half of the draft, but the back 4 to 5 picks, you got to mix it up. We know a lot more about the guys in the front of the draft. And I think that's true, but I also think it is too broad of a statement. And that's what I kind of want to bring up. That's why I wanted to do this show. Because, yeah, so if you're saying the first half of the draft, you're talking the first 9 rounds. And I think ADP value in the second round is different than ADP value in the first round. ADP value in the 5th round is a sure of a hell a lot different than ADP value in the first round.
And
so
and why? Sorry, not to cut you off, but the why is because if Stephon Diggs or AJ Brown go ahead of Tyreek Hill, and you get Tyreek Hill, you now have a player who, look, we all like Stephon Diggs and AJ Brown. Tyreek Hill projects closer to Justin Jefferson than he does to those guys. You're getting a better player. But you also are getting a potential combination of players with Tyreek Hill that is massively underrepresented because he usually goes right 3rd, 4th, or 5th in drafts, and you get him 8th or 9th. Now you have him with Garrett Wilson. If I could goddamn get one Tyreek Hill and Garrett Wilson team, I would be elated, right? And I would be like nervous to not screw it up the rest of the way. But like, that's the point, is the why matters on like, it's all about the why. Like, if you got Stephon Diggs at 11, but you still just took him with the same guys that everybody takes him with right at 8, like, it doesn't matter. Like, the ADP value was literally useless. All you did was take the same thing that everybody else took with their Stephon Diggs teams. And so it's always just like everything with best ball, but it is always about the why behind all of that. And ADP, I think, is the best example of it. And once you can kind of diagnose that why and diagnose the tiers, man, it is like, it's the most powerful thing, I think, because there are going to be guys that you will and you will just figure out as the draft flows when that ADP value, right? When you're, oh shit, this guy's 20 picks past ADP. Please fall to me. Please fall. You'll know when to root for that guy to fall to you. And then you'll know when, like, no, like, I don't care that Derek Carr's 25 picks past ADP. He doesn't make sense on this team. Just literally ignore him, like, move on, like, keep moving on to the next or whatever. And like, being able to do that is like a huge skill in drafting. And it's really hard because, like you said, I screwed it up today. Like, you're going to, you're human. That you get 30 seconds less than, if you're like doing something else, the Underdog app does, you once you get the notification, it's like, oh shit, there's already only 20 seconds left. And the first thing that hits you is like, oh shit, George Pickens is 12 picks past ADP or whatever. And you're like, boom, you know what I mean? I'm like, and then you take him and then you wait 30 seconds. You're like, fuck, shit, I shouldn't. God damn it.
I needed Dobbins there.
Yeah. This is a Lamar team. And I don't have any fucking Ravens, and like, you're mad, but like, it's really easy to do that. And it's like, yes, George Pickens was an ADP follower, but now you have naked Lamar Jackson, which is like not the end of the world, but it's like, that's not what you set out to accomplish with this team. And that didn't make even though he's an ADP value, it didn't make this team better. And the whole goal is to make your team better with every single pick. And like, that's why ADP value is just one lever to pull amongst 15 levers or whatever that we're always trying to do within 20 or 30 seconds, right? When we get on the clock.
So going back to like a month ago or so, I drafted my favorite team that I've drafted so far, and I've shared this team a few times. I'm not going to go over the entire roster, but I did this based on tiers.
Thank you.
I did this based on tiers, though. So I have, obviously, just like I think 99.9% of the people, Jefferson and Chase in their own tier of wide receivers. They are the 1-2 picks. I'm never going to change that. I can't imagine what scenario would alter that for me. The next range is that Kupp, Tyreek Hill. God, who am I forgetting right now? There's another one. Well, McCaffrey. You can call it McCaffrey, Kelsey. Like,
CMC,
there's
Kelsey,
that.
Yep.
Yeah, you can call that
Top
all
6.
one tier. And then there's, to me, I like AJ Brown over Diggs. They're like a tier, but he's like at a gold star next to him. But that tier of receivers with that Kupp Hill tier is close to me. They're still below them, But I decided I want to mix up a draft, and the next time I get the 103, as long as Chase or, Jefferson don't fall for some reason, I'm grabbing AJ Brown, and I want to see what that flipped roster can look like, grabbing him at the 3. And I loved the roster I came up with for that one. Right. All I did that was different in that draft, it was a double elite QB build. It was different in that front too. But those were the only 2 things I did different. Everything else was basically by ADP. And the roster construction, like the roster looks so different just by making 2 alterations to that team. And I loved it. And foolishly, I haven't done it again. And I need to do it again. Like as I'm talking about, it's like I need to make sure I do 1, maybe 2 more of these teams. Not saying do it every single time, but if that tier is close enough to the next one, I think you can make little adjustments like that. The perfect example of it, which we also always go back to, is the team that you and Pete drafted 2 years ago. You did the exact same thing. I think it was from the 103 too,
102.
where was the 102 where you grabbed Devontae Adams, who was a late first round at that point, like mid to late first rounder. And the team was so unique. You didn't win. You got a top 10 finish and
really fucking close to winning.
But that team was so different than every other team that made it there.
And Devontae was popular, but we guaranteed ourselves nobody ever remembers this part of it. Devontae was like 25% owned in that final. So Mark Andrews was like 50, Cooper Kupp was like 30 or 40 or something like that year, 2 years ago. T. Higgins was up there. Actually, Jamar Chase, who we had on our team, was only like 8% because T went off in week 16. Right. But Devontae was not like low owned. Like, especially if you remember that year, there were like Devontae sitting out, Devontae asking out. He was a 2nd round pick for a portion of that summer. And so we settled in, as you said, in the late first. And that was CMC was the 101 on the Panthers, and Dalvin Cook was the 102 on the Vikings. And we got the 102 on that draft, and we took Devontae Adams at the 102. And people fucking hated it, dude. People were like, some people have him in the 2nd round. How could you take him at the 102? And literally what we just said is basically what you just said. No one is going to have a Devontae Adams team like this. He's the best wide receiver in fantasy, which he was that year. Well, him and Cooper Kupp. He's the best 1st round pick wide receiver. Let's just say that. We're going to get him with this funky combination. Now we're going to get him at, with 2-3 turn, which turned out to be wide receivers for us. And then it also turned into 4-5 turn wide receivers, which turned into Jamar Chase. As you mentioned, Jamar Chase went at that spot. And so like literally everyone from Devontae after our team was low owned because Devontae was one of the guys you air quotes needed from the first 2 rounds, but we had him with just because we took him at a spot that he never, ever, ever goes, even though like, dude, you probably could have made a case for Devontae. I guess maybe not 101 over CMC, but like you could have made a case he was the 102. The only reason he didn't go there was because of the issues of him going later, right? It's like the Darrell Henderson. Like Darrell Henderson was probably like a 2-3 turn pick, but he didn't go that high because he was going in the 12th round before Cam Akers got hurt. Same thing with Devontae. And so we've just like flipped it, right? We did what you did with the Eagles. We just said, you know what? We're just going to flip this create the most unique Devontae Adams team in this tournament and like just kind of let that run with us. Like we didn't draft any of the best players in fantasy that year. That was Cooper Kupp year, Mark Andrews year, right? JT year. That was all those guys. We had none of them. Literally none. We had Jamar Chase, who was a very good pick, and obviously you needed in week 17. But we drafted a 0 running back team. We drafted a 2 quarterback team with Dak and Mac Jones. They were like average at best. We drafted a 2 tight end team with Kyle Pitts, who fucking sucked, shocker, and Hunter Henry, who was like a pretty good pick, but like, a 17th round tight end or whatever. We drafted our first running back was Raheem Mostert. He got hurt on like the 3rd carry of the season, right? Like we were instantly down to 5 running backs on a 0 running back team. Probably not great, but because of the way we went about the strategy of that draft, we never reached for anything other than Devontae at the 102. Literally. We just drafted the best team from their fourth, and we created this unique Devontae Adams team. And it was like, look, if Devontae smashes, we're going to have a pretty good team probably, right? If we can have some health. And we did. And, if we got a little bit better bounce of the ball, who knows what would have happened in week 17. We were in my opinion, the most live team other than Liam to win that thing. It didn't totally work out. Michael Gallup got hurt. Kyle Pitts got hurt. They both counted. They actually both counted in our score, but it was like, we did one thing, like kind of different. And we took the best wide receiver in fantasy at the 102. That was it. Like that wasn't even crazy. But yet everyone is so tied to ADP that we instantly created this leveraged roster from one decision.
Right. And GA in the chat says that the AJ Brown thing is the most common thing this year. They move him up trying to get the Eagles mega stack. I don't see that too often in any of my drafts. I've seen it one time. So what I would implore people to do that have draft IQ, that have the spike week tools, just go over to your lineups and do a combo search. See if you have AJ Brown and T Higgins. I'm going to guess if you have it, maybe once, but there's two guys that haven't really moved in the draft all year. Right. So where they're going in the draft, AJ Brown is that like later first round. T Higgins is always top of the third round. They don't line up ever to get drafted together. And that's an easy example to do it with, but there's other examples you can look at. We did it earlier. I have 35% Mahomes. I don't have a Mahomes Waddle team, like at all. Do I have a Mahomes Olave team? Probably not. Right. So maybe those are like, if I'm going to be so overweight on a guy, and not everyone's doing what I'm doing, so I'm not telling you to go do this, but if you are heavily overweight on a guy in like the second round, maybe you need to start looking at the end of that first round and looking at the combos with the other second round picks, right? Like maybe I need to see if I have a Mahomes Olave combo and I need to do it. Josh says that he has one AGB Higgins team, but we know that Josh is drafting a ton of teams. So that shows you like, this is a volume drafter that only has one combination of that. I'm a volume drafter that probably only has one combination of that, maybe two. Right.
I don't imagine that there's hardly any out there to that exact point. And I think your point about this isn't no one is saying massage every single like ownership combo that you have. You're a fucking human. I do this for a living. Like literally I spend every waking hour thinking about best ball, and I can't possibly massage every ownership combo that I have. But I think it's a couple different things. Exactly what you said. Like there are guys that you are taking stands on. My opinion is not that you need to take player stands, because you definitely do not. If you just want to kind of let the market decide, your player takes, or let someone else decide your player takes, I think that's totally fine. But I also have a pretty strong, belief that most people enjoy putting their opinions on players to use. And that's the fun of this, is like, you like Patrick Mahomes, so draft a bunch of fucking Patrick Mahomes, right? Like I want to draft a lot of J.K. Dobbins because that's my opinion. If I'm going to put my money behind it, let's do it. So massage those, right? Because it's also going to be a good indication of your entire portfolio. Like you have 6% Keenan Allen. We probably don't got to drill down into all the Keenan Allen, combinations you have. You can, however, massage the ones in those. And I guess I shouldn't have said that about Keenan, because I'm going to contradict myself. You can do it within certain flat tiers, right? That area, mid to late third round wide receiver to early fifth to middle of the fifth wide receiver, depending upon the site, especially, right? From Ridley or Amari or DK Metcalf, wherever you define that tier, down to DJ Moore or Ayuk or Christian Kirk or whatever, wherever you kind of define that, just be like, even if you're spreading out all of those guys, which I actually kind of am, just like, I don't know, they're all the fucking same to me. So like, I'm not going to, I don't want to lose because I drafted 25% of one guy who's the same and 2% of another guy who's the same. But I can look and be like, yeah, all of my DJ Moore and London are together. And it's like, okay, I like that for week 17, But like, do I want every one of my London and DJ Moore teams to be together? Like, no, probably not. I can massage
Right.
that, right? And I'm not taking big stands on those guys. I might be at 14% or something on them, but I can massage that. And so I think it's the guys who you really want to take stands on, and then those flat tiers that we're talking about, where like that's how we can be actionable about this thing and be smart and thoughtful, right? Like no one is saying like we kind of joke about ADP doesn't matter and like all these different things, but how do you actually take this away and go to your teams and go to your draft IQ and say, okay, now what do I like? What can I fix for this last month? Because like we got a month left, dude. And like you only got so many drafts.
Exactly a month, right?
Yes. You only got so many drafts that you're going to get a chance to like fix these things. And like we're trying to accomplish a lot of things. Like I just took Rico Dowdle in a draft today for the first round,
baby.
You know me with the late round running backs, right? But that's like I'm trying to achieve that right now, right? Evan Hall, like it's kind of a meme, but like I was trying to hit Evan Hall in like every draft because I'm like, this is the thing I want to accomplish right now. In 2 weeks, I'm probably going to have a new guy. And it was less than 2 weeks. And now it's like Rico Dowdle. I had no fucking idea that he was a thing for the Cowboys, to be totally honest. But now I'm like, I want to, he's undrafted in all these tournaments. I want to mix him in. But I personally struggle with I'll be really good about that. I'll be like, all right, give me, this is the team. I'm going to take Hunter Henry on this one. And I'm going to take Rico Dowdle. I'm trying to massage that, but then I'm not massaging McLaurin and London and DJ Moore as well. And so, like I said, it's just important to remember you got 30 days left or whatever. Let's put that to good use and kind of make sure that our portfolio looks like we want it to down the stretch.
I actually think that was the perfect closing little monologue for this ADP talk, because I think it hits on the two main points, which is the tiers, especially the flat tiers, and how do we exploit it. So I don't think we need to ask for any more closing thoughts. I think we've kind of hit, I'm glad we did this show. I was looking forward to doing this show. I think it was important to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's gotten blown out of proportion a little bit in the industry. Like obviously it's a framework and we need a framework to work off of. So I'm not saying to throw ADP out the window, of course, but how do you use it? How do you exploit it? How does it benefit you? And I think we kind of hit on all those points today.
I agree.
I do have a 5-star review to read from the podcast app. And this one's from Touch of Green, titled Great Show. And they simply wrote 5 stars. Watch this every Sunday. So thank you for watching the Sunday show. I love it because that's the one that Erik gets upset about every time when that's the one.
Because I don't do it. That's my day. I rest. I rest on Sundays, and Rob does it, and everybody loves the fucking Sunday shows.
They love the Sunday shows. But if you want to leave a 5-star review, you can do that on iTunes. You can probably do that on other platforms. If you decide to leave a 5-star review on one of the YouTube videos, I will also read that. Just make sure that you write 5 stars. Right now, you have a few days left to get into the giveaway. We are giving away a Kurt Warner authentic helmet. It is it's a nice helmet. It's an authentic one. It's one if you don't like Kurt Warner, if you don't like the Arizona Cardinals, you can wear it and run into a brick wall with it. I do not recommend it, but it is a real football helmet. You can put it on your head. You can wear it around the house. But that is kind of everything that I have. Do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I was just going to say, I just wanted to reiterate that we're kind of calling August Drafters Month. If you're unfamiliar, if you're a big sicko and you've been following, you're already familiar for sure. But if you want to sign up for the Spike Week tools, right? We just talked about, we got 30 days left and you're trying to massage those player combinations and those exposures and those stacks and all that kind of stuff. The best way to do it is using the Draft Hacker, the overlays for your drafts. And so you can get access to that for free up in the corner here. If you sign up for Drafters, use promo code Spike, fill out the form on the website, you will get a free month. So the next month, kind of the final month, basically, of best ball draft season, you can get free access to the Draft Hacker and Draft IQ and all these things that we've been talking about here. That honestly, I'm biased. We're biased, of course, but like especially at this time of the year, I find to be invaluable for drafting. I use them every single day, literally Like not
Mhm.
even exaggeration. We built them because we want to use them. It's not
Right.
one of those things where like we built it, let's sell it to people. I use it more than I even like talk about it. I really think it's really helpful, especially at this time of year. And we're going to be doing a bunch of drafters content as well as drafters drafts. And I say that not because like I really actually, I mean, we love drafters. I love the people at drafters. The product has gotten so much better over the course of the last couple of years, but I say it because we're all players. I'm a player too. Rob is a player. We're trying to grind these edges, baby. And that their big tournament is not going to fill, and it's not going to come goddamn close.
It's about
to
20% full right now. So
it is 20%
there's
full
gonna
with
overlay.
30 days left. It is going to overlay, and overlay is important in all these tournaments, but in a cumulative scoring format, you are instantly giving yourself a better chance at min cashing like right away. The odds of winning are a little bit better, but man, that rake is like huge, man. It's so huge on drafters. And so we're going to be really grinding that here for the next month. And, I know whether it's not for you or whatever, everybody can play whatever that they want to play, but I'm going to be maxing that $20 on drafters to try to get it's $300,000 to first place too. It's not like we're talking about chump change.
Great payout structure.
A great payout structure, flat, but also life-changing money up top. And I think we're going to get to like 70% full.
That's what I heard
maybe.
the projection was, 70%ish.
So like think about that. Like that is pretty sweet. So I just wanted to mention that, hit up the draft hacker, and so you can get $100 free at drafters to go do 5 of those drafts, and you can get free access to Spike Week, all sorts of good stuff if you use promo code Spike.
And they have some promos on their own site depending on how many teams
they're
you
giving away
draft in
free
August.
tickets. Yep.
So make sure you do that. Last thing, and then I'm going to hit this outro button. Next Monday, Eric and myself are going to do the shot stream where we draft teams and do shots. I think we're going to do it on Underdog. We're going to do one of the $3 tournaments, and we're going to drop that in Discord just so that's a friends and family draft while we do these shots. And it's been requested that we do another challenge stream. So that's what you're going to get. You're going to get the shots. It was down to that or a donut eating contest, and people seem to want the shots. So
shocked.
As someone that doesn't drink a ton, it's going to be a great night for me. But we have to do it Monday because I cannot go on the Ghost show and start rambling about Ghost while I'm hammered. So it's got to be a Monday night stream. Anyways, that's going to do it for myself. That does it for Eric. We will catch you next time. Peace. Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? You turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there. You can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.